Welcome. I'm Chris Williams and I'm here in the Plaid Crafts studio, and we are here along with Andy Jones, and we are going to provide to you an extra special episode of our 2022 Plaid New Product Showcase. Today, our new products that we're featuring are FolkArt products, and they're all about finishes. We have some new specialty finishes, and Andy's going to bring back some old heroes in our FolkArt line too with a few demonstrations. And I'm here to tell you that we are going to share all about a brand new product called FolkArt Select. This is a FolkArt all-purpose sealer, and we also have some new brush-on varnishes in both a gloss and a satin finish, so that when you're completed your artwork, you can then protect it with a beautiful brush-on finish. Again, they're available in the satin as well as a gloss. And then wait, there's even better yet. If you're worried about brush marks when you're putting a finish on a surface, we have taken control of that for you. We have a brand new product that is a spray-on varnish. It's available in both a gloss and a matte finish. And this is called FolkArt Select Seal. FolkArt Select Seal, and Andy's going to share all of that sort of information along with you. Welcome as you joining in to us today. Be sure, I want to invite you to leave a comment or ask questions along the way. I have my iPad here and we will tune in to all of that. We want to be sure and answer all the questions that you might have, and just by commenting today, whether it's a comment or a question, you are officially entered into a prize package drawing. We're going to be giving away some of these FolkArt specialty finishes. So I think we're going to have a fun episode today. Be sure and ask your questions. Without further ado, I know you want to know everything there is to know. The very first product that we're going to demonstrate is this one here. This is in an 8-ounce bottle, and Andy's going to tell us all about the FolkArt all-purpose sealer. So Andy, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thank you, Chris. Well, our FolkArt all-purpose sealer is a great sealer to start your project with. This week we've shown you all sorts of great paints and different sort of specialty things that we have for you, but to get started, a good sealer on a wood surface is the best place to start. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some of the sealer into a little bowl here, and this just makes it easier to apply to your surface. So I'm using a dry flat brush, and I'm going to fill my brush really full of the sealer, and then I have just a piece of raw unpainted wood, and I'm going to begin just to brush a light coat of the sealer on the surface. And what this is going to do, it is going to fill the pores of the wood with the sealer. So it's going to seal the pores of the wood. It's also going to help raise the grain of the wood. And anytime you put something damp on unfinished wood, it will raise the grain, but the sealer is going to raise the grain in such a way that once this is dry, and I'm going to set this aside right now so that you can see that our sealer doesn't really change the color of the wood. And I think Chris has got a question for me.
I do, Andy.
Okay.
This is a question, and I think it's a great question. It's bringing to you from Terita. She wants to know, does this all-purpose sealer yellow with time?
No, it doesn't. It's going to remain crystal clear. It doesn't change the color of the wood. So if you wanted to do something with the wood grain showing, this is perfect for that. It may look just a little bit milky going on, but it's going to dry completely clear. And when this is dry, you can take your fine sandpaper and sand with the grain, and that will smooth down the grain of the wood which we raised by applying the sealer. So then you have a perfectly sealed and very smooth surface on which to work. So this is a great first step anytime you want to work on a wooden surface. But it's not just for wooden surfaces. You can apply this on any porous surface to give it a good sealed surface. So whether it's a canvas or paper mache or any sort of porous surface, it's great for that. And you can also use it on non-porous surfaces to give yourself a nice bonding primer so that your paint will adhere better to a non-porous surface. So the FolkArt All-Purpose Sealer is great for any time you're ready to start a new project. It's a great foundation.
And Andy, I just want to help Shirley here. She's wanting to know where those products are located and what retailers. Shirley, you can look at all of your local retailers because eventually all these new products will be out there. But for now, I want to direct you to please follow or visit plaidonline.com/new. All of the new products that we are showcasing this entire week for the 2022 New Product Showcase can be found at that address. And I'll go ahead and type that in the comments too while Andy's visiting.
Okay, that's great, Chris. Thank you. And remember, it is plaidonline.com/new. All right, so the all-purpose sealer is a great first step. And oftentimes, we're going to go to switching from our brand new products to a tried and true product. We have FolkArt Gesso. And gesso is also, it's not only a white paint, but it's also a great sealer. So a lot of times people want to use the FolkArt Gesso if you are working on a canvas surface and you think that your canvas might be a little bit too rough. The weave of the canvas isn't fine enough. So you can always brush a coat of gesso on a canvas surface to get started. Paint your coat of gesso on, let it dry, and then sand, and you're great to continue on with your canvas painting. Another tip is that you can also use gesso as a white paint. If you run out of your regular FolkArt acrylic, you can substitute with FolkArt Gesso, and I'll show you. Bring a painting in here so that you can see kind of up close. This one has gesso in the background, and we've also used it as a paint color using some of our FolkArt matte acrylics mixed in or blended into the gesso to create the background of this painting. All right.
Andy, can we back up for a moment?
Sure, put it in reverse, Chris. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, we had a comment here that from one of our viewers. I'm going back to it now. How long does it take to dry before you can paint on it? And I believe we're going back to the all-purpose sealer.
Give it a couple of hours to get good and dry. It's going to absorb into the wood, but make sure that when you touch it, it feels dry, and it also does not feel cool to the touch. It should just be room temperature when you touch it, and then you know you're dry and ready to move on.
Thank you, Andy. That was a question from Tyler in Paris, France.
Okay.
And Anna Fleury would like to know, can you use the all-purpose sealer on metal?
Yes, you can. Just brush it on a nice thin coat, let it dry, and then you're good to apply your acrylic paint on top of it, or just create your own artwork directly on top of the all-purpose sealer. Does that answer those questions?
It sure does. Thank you so much, Andy.
No problem. All right, so we've talked a little bit about gesso as a first step sometimes for a canvas painting. So let's talk about what happens when you have finished your canvas painting. And I'm going to tip this in the light, so I think here you can see very clearly that this half of the painting is very, very shiny. It's got a super high gloss finish on it, and this has a very matte finish. This particular painting was finished using the FolkArt Select Seal, and here is, let me show you the gloss label so you can see that. So when this painting was done, I did this to show the difference between the two finishes, but you ordinarily would not tape off and do two sheens on one canvas. But you simply need to, off to the side, you can pump and prime the spray nozzle, and then when you're ready to go using the Select Seal, I like to, and it's going to be kind of hard to show this on camera, but you want to stand your canvas almost completely vertical, and then begin to pump spray along the top, and then continue to pump spray until you have the whole surface covered. Now, people are going to ask, does this run? Will it drip? What about brush marks? All of that kind of stuff. Well, the way that I apply it, I like to apply a nice kind of kind of a flood coat on this, so that as you are moving down the canvas, any excess is going to actually run down to the bottom of the canvas, and it will just drip off the edge there, and you don't have to worry about that. But it's also going to remove any type of brush mark that you would have. So it's going to kind of level and even itself out as it coats the surface. You should apply maybe 2 coats to get a really nice, even finish on it. But it's very, very user-friendly, very easy to pump spray this, and it doesn't have the fume problem that a traditional aerosol finish would have. So you can use this indoors. You don't have to do this in a super well ventilated area or outdoors. Let me caution you that you should clean your spray nozzle after every use. So I like to take the nozzle off of my bottle and just keep pumping it till there's no more finish coming out of it. Then I would take like a plastic drink cup, fill it with some water, put the nozzle in there and spray till I've cleaned out the nozzle with clear water. Then put the nozzle and sprayer back on your bottle and then close it up with your little plastic top. That way it's clean and ready to go the next time you're ready to use your FolkArt Select Seal spray finish.
And Andy, I'd like to add to that again, the FolkArt Select Seal, which is a pump spray seal. It is available both in the gloss and the matte finish. And we do have a question from Anna, and she was wanting to know, can you still brush after you apply it on? And yes, Anna, I've done that several times myself too. Once you kind of flood the area like Andy was suggesting, you can then even take a brush, and especially if your surface is not like a canvas or a wooden plaque, perhaps it is a sculpture of some sort.
Sure.
You painted on maybe a bunny for Easter or something like that, where you've got little nooks and crannies, a little statue or a little figurine. You can then use your brush to kind of get into those little nooks and crannies and crevices.
Yes.
Because this is a very thin viscosity seal, and it really works well to get in so many different little tight nooks and crannies.
It does, and I think you're absolutely going to love the 2 different sheens. Some people love the matte finish, and as I continue to age, I find myself loving a really high gloss finish. So the FolkArt Select Seal Gloss is a really great way to get a brilliantly shiny finish on your project. So you can't go wrong with these, and this is nice for people who don't like to brush. You can apply this pump spray to your project.
And for those of you that are just tuning in and joining us, welcome. This is another episode this week of our 2022 Plaid New Product Showcase. Today, Andy Jones and myself, Chris Williams, we are previewing for you some new FolkArt products. These are FolkArt finishes, and Andy will give a recap at the end, but so far we previewed a little bit about a new sealer that's available and some spray or pump spray seal varnishes. So, Andy, I think there's more to show and tell.
There is more to show and tell. There are people who love a traditional brush-on finish. And so we now have FolkArt varnishes. We have a gloss varnish, and we have a satin varnish. So I'll bring these up a little closer so you can see the labels, what they look like. And then I've got a little painting here, and I'm going to show you what the gloss varnish looks like when it's applied to a painting. So let me, again, using a little bowl, and these are our eco-friendly bowls, but pro tip of the day, if you are going to use brush-on varnish, I take, this is a synthetic chip brush, and I label it varnish only on both sides of the brush, so that you know, and anybody who's rummaging in your craft supplies knows that this brush is for use only with varnish. You never want to apply a brush-on varnish with a brush that has been used to apply any kind of paint. That's generally just asking for problems.
And if I can add to that, I would make sure that those bristles are very soft and flexible.
Yes.
You don't want a chip brush that's the typical hard bristle.
You don't want a hog bristle brush. No.
That's right.
This is a synthetic chip brush, and the bristles are, as you can see, very, very soft. All right, so I'm going to take my gloss varnish, and I'm going to put some into my bowl. That just makes it very easy for me to load my brush and apply the finish to the surface. Now, your gloss varnish is going to do a couple of different things. First and foremost, it's going to seal and protect your painting. So while acrylic paints are generally water resistant, or some people call them waterproof, the FolkArt matte acrylics, which are one of my favorite formulas that we have, dry to a very, very matte finish, and I love painting with them. But I also love a gloss finish when I'm all done. So the sheen of your painting is controlled by the varnish or the finish that you put on it. So any FolkArt paint that you use, if you want a gloss finish on it, you can achieve that by applying the gloss varnish. The other thing it's going to do is really brighten and liven up the colors. So as I'm brushing this on, using a nice gentle pressure on the brush, sweeping all the way across the painting, using sweeping strokes, you can see that this varnish is really making this paint look beautiful and very, very glossy. And you want to make sure that you use just the lightest touch when you are putting your final stroke on. So I'm just going to leave it partially varnished and partially not varnished so that you can really see the difference that you get using the FolkArt gloss varnish that we have. So this is the way that I would finish a painting, and make sure that you do the edges of your piece as well. And again, notice that I'm always finishing up using a long light stroke all the way across the object that I'm varnishing. So when I'm finished with this brush, I'm going to wash it immediately in soapy water so that no varnish dries in my brush. Anytime you're working with water-based products, you want to make sure that you clean your tools as soon as you're finished with them so that nothing dries in your brush. And remember that these products are water-based, they're non-toxic, and they're made right here in the USA. So that is the FolkArt gloss varnish. It also comes in a satin finish as well.
Andy, if I may, we have a question from Carol.
Okay.
And we're going to back the bus up one more time.
Okay.
This is regarding the FolkArt Select Seal, which is the pump spray
Yes.
seal. Carol made the comment that this would be good for those that are rock painters.
Oh,
But she wanted
absolutely.
to know, does the finish make the color of your paint underneath bleed?
It does not. What it does is it makes the color underneath more brilliant. So
It's basically sealing or setting that paint color in place,
exactly,
giving you a layer of protection on top.
and the Select Seal is a polyurethane varnish that is good for indoor or outdoor use.
Yes. So the rock painting idea is perfect. with
Yes,
this garment.
absolutely, and it's such a popular craft that people are doing, and they love to leave them in different places for people to find them. Okay, so we have talked now about our sealer and our new brush-on and pump spray varnishes. So those are all things that you want to order immediately to have as part of your crafting arsenal. So now we're going to shift gears back to some of our tried and true products, and I want to show you one of the most popular items that we have in our finishes, and that is a weathered crackle look. So you can see in the background of this painting we have kind of a bright turquoise showing through a dark blue background. So I'm going to show you how to achieve this effect. It's very, very easy, very, very fun, and something that I think you'll enjoy using. All right, so I'm going to set that aside, and I have here a little wooden plaque, and it looks like it's very shiny, and I'm going to tell you exactly how we got to this point. First of all, I sealed my wood with the FolkArt all-purpose sealer and then sanded it. And once that was sealed and sanded and ready to go, I applied a coat of FolkArt matte acrylic in a teal color and let that dry. Now you say, I applied the matte acrylic, but it looks so shiny. why does that look shiny? Well, I'm going to tell you. I applied a coat of the FolkArt Crackle medium to the surface. And this says it creates an instant crackle effect. And it does create an instant crackle effect, and I'm going to show you how that happens in just a second. But I've brushed a coat of that on, and as you can see, I'm touching it, so I have let that dry. Now, this teal color is going to show through the top coat. So this is what is going to show through when the top coat crackles, and we have this showing through into our background. All right, I'm going to use a FolkArt acrylic color called Patina. So I'm going to put some of that out on my palette. And I'm going to use a very soft, flat brush for this. Now, there are any number of ways that people have applied their top coats over the years.
That is for sure. There's so many different techniques.
Yes, and I'm going to show you what I think is the most successful one. To start out, a lot of people want to load their brush with the color that's going to be the top coat, and they try to brush this all the way across the surface in one continuous motion, and then they want to make another stripe next to that. And the problem is they don't have enough paint on their brush to get from point A to point B. And they go back and they touch it, and as soon as you go back and touch it, you've created a mess.
And another problem with that technique too is they might have too much paint on their brush, leaving ridges of color between each horizontal or vertical stripe.
Yes.
And then you're left with excess paint.
And it never turns out exactly the way you want it to.
No.
Now, you can also use a natural sea sponge and sponge the color on, and that'll give you a different kind of crackle pattern. And I don't think that's exactly a beautiful way to do it, but it will work. I'm going to show you the way that I like to do it, and that is to just kind of crisscross or overlap the strokes as I go, and I'm going to move quickly across the surface using a generous amount of paint, but not flood the surface, and then we'll see the crackle effect actually happening. So the more paint you have on your brush, the larger your cracks will be. Smaller amounts of paint or a thinner application will give you finer cracks. Now, having said that, it's still kind of a little bit of a mystery that's going to happen. It's going to be a little bit of a magic act here. So you can plan exactly what you want, and you don't pitch a fit. So I'm going to load my brush with the FolkArt color called Patina, and I'm going to begin, and once I start, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to cover the whole surface with the patina using kind of crisscrossed overlap strokes, and I'm going to move quickly because where I overlap, I want to overlap before the crackle starts to happen. Once your crackle starts to happen, don't mess with it. Trust me when I say those words, don't mess with it. If you mess with it, you're going to not love your results. All right, so take a deep breath, load that brush up, and here we go. And I'm sure Chris is going to have some tips and hints for you, because she is a great crackler.
Oh, I love the way that you're doing it now, Andy, because I use that same slip slap technique, and I use very light pressure on my hand, and sometimes even hold the brush back for a more painterly effect, rather than holding and gripping up tight next to the ferrule, because you'll find that you're using less pressure that way too. But
Yes.
this way to crackle is a great overall effect, and all of the crackle lines will separate in different directions because you've applied that top layer of paint in different directions.
And I'm just continuing to apply this to the surface, and I'm about to cough, so pardon me. Excuse me. And we are just about to have the whole surface covered, and I'm stopping with the application of paint. And now I'm going to bring this up as close as I can to the camera.
Sometimes it takes a moment.
Well, you can already see that we're getting all sorts of beautiful crackles happening all over this surface. And as we watch this happen, it's like magic. You get this beautiful crackle effect. and you can do this in just about any color combination you want to. You can have a very light base coat, put a dark color on top, and you'll see those light crackles coming through. This time we had a dark base coat, and I put a light color on top, so you can see the dark crackles happening all over the surface now. So as I said, it's just like magic happening.
Yes, and just to reinforce the technique again, the heavier paint application on this top coat, the patina coat that Andy did today, the heavier you apply that paint, the larger or the wider the cracks are going to be. Less paint will give you more of a fine line of cracks. You'll get more cracks and they'll be much finer, closer together.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you can't really predict exactly how this is going to work
It's
out.
all magic.
It is all magic. But because we put the paint on in different directions, we've got some that are moving parallel to the edges of the board, and we've got some that are at an angle to it. But it's just giving us a wonderful crackle effect. And this is one of the crackle techniques that works right in front of your eyes, just like magic. And you just can't go wrong.
Using that slip slap technique to apply that top layer of paint, as Andy is pointing out, the cracks do appear in different directions all over. To me, it's a much more interesting crackle background rather than trying to do that linear
The linear
application.
thing, I'm just here to tell you.
It's not as much interest.
It's not as interesting. It's super difficult to do, and it rarely looks as good as it does in your head.
Right.
So this
right.
one always works out beautifully, and you can almost never go wrong. So remember, apply the color that you want to show through the cracks, then apply a coat of the Crackle medium, let that dry, and then apply your top coat of your chosen acrylic color using the slip slap technique.
And question for you, Andy, once the weather crackle has been applied and we're allowing it to dry, and before you apply the top coat, question came through is the crackle tacky?
It's only tacky until it's dry. Once it's dry, and you shouldn't put it on if it's not dry.
And let's talk about the dry time of the top layer of paint, in this case your patina that you applied.
This is already, it's already crackled and it's starting to dry. I would still go ahead and let this dry just like I would let any coat of acrylic paint dry. Give it a couple of hours to completely dry. You want to make sure that your paint is dry to the touch and that it does not feel cool.
All right, question came in from Sherry.
Okay.
She's wanting to know, do you really need to seal your surface before you do the crackling technique, or can you go right to putting your base paint down and then the crackle and so on?
Sealing your surface is always the best practice. Now, there are times when you could just slap on your base coat acrylic and go if you wanted to do that, but again, sealing your surface is best practice. So I always recommend that you take the time to properly prepare your surface so that your craft project or your art piece will be a thing of beauty and a joy forever.
And Andy, let's talk about this. So now you've prepared your little plaque to this point. Let's say you were going to go ahead and paint a design on top of that using the crackle as a background.
Yes.
Would you seal that crackled background first before you transferred your design?
No, I would not. Here is the canvas that I painted. We did the same crackle background, but different color combination on the canvas painting. Once the background had dried, I sketched my design on and then painted the design directly on the background. No need to seal it in between the crackle background and painting your design on the project.
And Tara would like to know, is the Crackle medium archival?
I would say for our purposes, it's as archival as it needs to be. I think I don't know that I'm planning on these projects lasting for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's going to last for your lifetime. It's going to be just fine.
And the Crackle medium, we should also note, although Andy has a canvas there and he demonstrated on a little wooden plaque, you can also crackle metal surfaces and paper mache surfaces. And
any surface you can paint, you can crackle. There's no limit to the surfaces that you can put the Crackle finish on. If you can brush a base coat on, then you put your Crackle medium on, then brush the top coat that's going to crack. It can go on just about anything.
And the FolkArt Crackle that we've just been demonstrating is not a new product, but it's a great one that we love to use often, and it seems to be new to so many people because they have not yet tried it. And that's why we threw it in with our new product presentation today, because oftentimes people say, I have that Crackle, but I've never used it. So I'm glad that you spent some time, Andy, sharing with everyone exactly what the best practices are for this product.
Well, sometimes new doesn't mean new to the market, but it might mean new to you. So we're happy to share these great specialty technique mediums that we have, along with our new brush on, spray on, and our sealer. So brand new products and great products that you just might not know about.
Let's do a real quick recap and show the bottles, Andy,
Absolutely.
overhead maybe. So that let's start out with our FolkArt All-Purpose Sealer.
Yes, indeed. It's got the orange label, and this is a great first step for different surfaces that you're working on. So if your surface is porous, this is going to seal your surface and get you ready to craft on it. If your surface is sealed or non-porous, you can put this on as a great primer. So the FolkArt All-Purpose Sealer should be in your arsenal of supplies and your first product that you go to create a new project. All right, then we have our brush-on varnishes. So we've got the FolkArt Gloss and the FolkArt Satin Varnish, and these are available in 8-ounce bottles, and these are good for indoor or outdoor use. They are water-based and non-toxic, and like all FolkArt products made right here in the USA. So those are our brush-on finishes, and then we have the exciting new pump spray varnishes. We have our FolkArt Select Seal in the gloss and the matte finish. So these are great for anybody who doesn't like to brush on a finish. You can pump spray your way to a beautiful gloss or matte finish. And these are a polyurethane pump spray. They are good for indoor-outdoor use. Again, they are non-toxic, water-based, and made in the USA. So,
thank you for all of that review, Andy.
No problem.
And thank
We're
you
happy.
everyone for tuning in today. Remember to visit plaidonline.com/new. And for those of you that have been commenting or still want to comment, remember that we're going to give away some of these new FolkArt specialty finishes today just by participating with either a question or a comment. I'm going to look and see if we have any other comments, Andy, if you have any recaps yourself.
Well, while you're looking to see if there are any last-minute comments, I want to remind everybody that Chris and I are live twice a week in the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group. So if you're not familiar with that, or you haven't taken time to come find us, we teach Lunch and Learns on Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon Eastern Time. And we welcome you to join that Facebook group and become part of our online community. Again, that's Let's Paint with Plaid right here on Facebook. So were there
Andy,
last-minute questions?
We do, and
Okay.
this question is from Tara, and it's regarding our new FolkArt All-Purpose Sealer.
Okay.
She would like to know, can you use this on wax? Let's say you wanted to paint on a pillar candle.
If you needed to paint on a pillar candle, you could absolutely brush this on, and it would give you a nice surface on which to paint. Sometimes painting on a wax surface is not the easiest thing to do because the wax does tend to repel acrylic paint. So putting a coat of this on your candle will help. The other thing you can do, even before you applied your all-purpose sealer, would be to use, and it used to be that everybody had neon stockings or some old pantyhose around the house. So if you can find some of those, or if you have some of those, you can make a little poof of the nylon and buff your candle with that, and that helps kind of take away some of the slick oiliness of the candle, and it will allow everything to adhere a little bit better. So you can buff with the nylon pantyhose, then apply a coat of your all-purpose sealer, and then paint directly on your pillar candle.
I have another question for you, Andy, and this
Okay.
one is from Mary.
All right.
And she would like to know what you would recommend to use as a top coat for any kind of painting that she normally does on canvases.
Yes, I think the either the brush-on varnish, the FolkArt gloss varnish, or the Select Seal gloss varnish. These would be great for your paintings. And like I said, the older I get, the shinier I want my canvases to be. So the gloss finish is my preferred sheen for this. But these are great to put on as a final protective coat on any of your canvas paintings.
Okay, and another great question. This one's from Brenda.
Okay.
And Andy, Brenda would like to know, can you use a sponge applicator or a foam brush when using the varnishes? You were demonstrating with a soft bristled chip brush.
Yes.
But she's asking about the sponge foam applicators.
Yes, I think it's time that, you said this was from Brenda?
Brenda?
Okay, I think it's time that Brenda put away her foam brush and invested in a nice synthetic chip brush, and you'll get a much better result. The foam brushes can sometimes add air bubbles or foam to your finish, and that's really not going to help her cause. So retire the foam brush for this and use a nice synthetic bristle brush, and you'll get a much more professional looking finish.
And Lori, you mentioned that this was your first time to catch us live here. I want to invite you to go back, stay here in the Plaid Crafts Facebook page, but you can go back and watch all of the new product showcase lessons and episodes that we did. We did every single day this week, and we've got some more tomorrow and even on Friday. So tune in every day now. We're doing tomorrow at 11, and we have one this afternoon at 3 o'clock too. So tune in at 11 and 3 Eastern Standard Time, and or go back and replay and watch the ones that we've already done live, because there's so many new fun products here at Plaid this year. So I don't want you to miss a thing. But thank you for tuning in today, Lori. And Andy, we have another question.
Okay,
Let's see
we'll
if I
try
can.
to come up with another answer.
Okay, so this one's from Pammy, and it's
Okay.
regarding our FolkArt Crackle.
Okay,
She's wanting to know that once you crackled your background,
yes,
and if you wanted to do the decorative painting right on top of it,
yes.
and you mentioned that you don't seal before you do your decorative painting, have you ever noticed that the decorative painting cracked too, where the crackle was exposed?
I've seen a very, very small amount of a crackle here and there on occasion. Doesn't happen all the time. And I will tell you that it's not enough to bother me.
Think about the lines of the cracks. They're very, very small.
Yeah, and
That's the only part of the crackle medium that is exposed.
Exactly, and it's really not going to cause you much problem at all. Like I said, there's never been enough for it to bother me. And I can be, as some people around here would say, I can be very particular about the way things need to look. And our technical advisor, Dylan, is giving a big smile at me being particular. But I don't seal over the crackle background. Just go ahead and paint and you'll be just fine. So are those our final questions, Chris? Or do we have a last minute Lucy with one more question?
I have a question here from Cindy.
Okay.
Cindy says, so the sealer is to help with paint going on your surface, and varnish is to protect your project. She'd like a definition between the all-purpose sealer and the two sets of varnishes
Yes.
that we talked about.
Sealer happens when you start your project. Varnish or finish happens when you at the end of your project. So maybe that's the best way to think about it, is the sealer is where you start, and your finish or your varnish is where you end your project. So sealer gets you ready to do all of your crafting, and your varnish protects what you've done when you have finished.
And can you explain on the two varnishes, Andy, the brush-on varnish as well as the pump spray varnish, do they both level out?
Yes, they are both very self-leveling varnish. This is the pump spray varnish, so you can see you get a nice level finish with that. Looks great. No brush marks, just shine. All right, and then let's see, I've got the other one here. Let me just bring this on, and you can see again, if you brush out your varnish using long, light, sweeping strokes, you should not end up with brush marks. They varnish, they disappear, and the varnish just leaves you with the sheen. So we've got a nice sheen on that, and then we've got a very matte finish over here. So the brush marks are not a problem with these varnishes. Just remember, your last application of the varnish or your last strokes are very light, sweeping strokes, and then the varnish will take care of any little tiny brush strokes. It'll just dissolve. So hopefully that's helped everyone with a little bit of information about sealing before you get started and varnishing when you have finished your project.
Thank you, Andy, for sharing all your knowledge of the new products with us today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today and remind you to please visit plaidonline.com/new. That's where you're going to find all the information of all the products that we are showcasing this week. And as always, Plaid always has something up their sleeves with extra discounts and hints for shopping. So thank you all for visiting that. Tune in, and 3 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Standard Time, we're going to showcase some more new products. We invite you to come back and join us then. I'm sure you're going to love everything that you see. Thank you, Andy Jones, for joining us today.
Thank you,
I'm Chris Williams, and we're signing off for yet another episode of our 2022 Plaid New Product Showcase.
Bye, everybody.